Hi, everyone, and welcome to my Management of Business Unit 2 series. In today's lesson, we are going to be looking at the major decisions in the production process. So, we will be looking at those major decisions involved in the input, conversion, and output stage of production. We will also look at different production methods and some of the factors that affect the location of production. Every business, whether it is a big company like a major juice manufacturer or a small operation, has to produce something. So they will either produce a goods like patty or juice or clothes, or they will be producing a service like a hairdresser or taxi service or banking services. So now the production process is basically how a business turns resources into finished products, and every single business follows the same basic structure: input, conversion, output. Inputs are everything you'll need to start the production process, and there are four main ones. You'll need resources like your raw materials, you will need land, you will need capital, money, machinery or tools, and you will need human resources or labor. So you will need workers or employees. For example, if you're going to be making juice, your inputs would be fruits like mango or pineapples. You will need bottles. You will also need labels, workers. You're going to need a juicing machine, or if you're using a blender, and maybe even a recipe or some knowledge of how to mix the flavors to make your juice. Next, we go to conversion, and this is where we turn that input into an output. And this can happen in two main ways. In manufacturing, you're making a physical good. If you're providing a service, you will be looking at providing an experience for your customers. For example, and we use the same juice example, this would have involved washing the fruits, peeling, cutting, blending, pouring it into the bottles. This is the conversion process. Or if you're providing a service like a barber, the input is the customer and your tools. Conversion is the process of cutting the hair, and the output would have been the finished hairstyle. And your outputs now will be your finished goods or the service, and it will also include waste from the conversion process. One critical thing that is often overlooked in this process is feedback. Feedback is where we use information as managers to improve a process. So if we have a customer and they're telling you that the juice is too sweet or the bottle is too small, then you can use that feedback to change the recipe, to possibly make a low sugar option available, and add a variety of sizes for your customers. So now that we have the model in our heads, let us look at the specific decisions managers have to make at each stage. And let's start with those input decisions. These are the what we need to begin decisions, as we said before. So first, we will have to look at the factors of production. This is basic economics. If you have a bakery, the bakery is going to need land or a building to operate from. You will also need labor. So you're going to need bakers, you need the cashiers, you'll need cleaners. You will also need capital. So where is the money going to come from to buy the ovens, the mixers, the freezers? And you will need the raw materials. So if you have a bakery, you're going to need flour, margarine, and those things. Second, you have to think about the location for production. Where should we put this bakery? Does the owner set up in a busy shopping center where the rent is possibly high, but the customer traffic is guaranteed, or in an industrial area where the rent is cheaper, but you will not see as much walk-in customers? So location is a very critical input decision, and that will affect everything else. Third, you will have to also think about forecasting, and this is the art of predicting the future. Specifically, how many breads are you going to need each day? If the bakery forecasts that it will sell 500 breads on a regular Tuesday, they will buy enough flour and to make that 500. If they forecast poorly and only make 300, then they run out of bread and they lose sales. But if they make 700 and they end up selling only 500, then they end up with 200 unsold. So forecasting keeps the business efficient. And finally, quality assurance, a very critical decision in the production process. And this is all about prevention. Before the bakery even begins to bake the first batch, they must decide on what are the quality standards. So you will need to decide on, will we use a specific brand of flour? Will we write down an exact recipe? How will we train our staff to know exactly how much to put in each batch of bread? So quality assurance is setting the rules before we even start anything. So now we move on to the conversion decisions. First on the list is production methods. How will the bakery actually produce the breads? Are they going to be using job production, where each bread is made individually by hand from start to finish? Probably not, because that would be too slow. They will likely use the batch production. So you will make the dough in one big batch in the morning, cut it in the small pieces, do the proofing, and then we go ahead and bake one big batch. Next, you will look at the production layout, and this is about how the workspace is physically arranged. So in our bakery, a good layout might have the mixing station near the storage area, and then the proofing may be done closer to the ovens. So once the breads are proofed, they go straight into baking. So a good layout will save you a lot of time and save energy. You want to know, what is the maximum amount of breads I can bake in a given day? What if I get a big order for 1,000 breads, but I'm only able to bake 500 per day? You need to be able to tell your customers, okay, for 1,000 breads, I need 2 days advance, so that we can make the 1,000 breads in the time that it is required and make sure our customers are happy. So capacity planning is about matching what you can produce with what customers are demanding. Next, we look at quality control. So remember, we talked about quality assurance, and that was the plan, the preventative methods. Quality control is the inspection during the process. So as we're baking the breads, we need to make sure our supervisor is doing some checks. Are each of the breads coming out having a nice golden brown look? Do we need to make any adjustments to temperature, to the ingredient? Quality control catches the problems while we still can fix them. And finally, we will have productivity decisions, and this is all about efficiency. How can the bakery get more output from the same amount of input? Maybe the bakery will need to invest in some new automatic dough rollers. Maybe they will need to retrain their staff. Maybe they need to invest in technology. Maybe they will need to reorganize the schedule. Productivity decisions are about working smarter, not harder. Okay, so now that we have gathered our inputs and we've made our conversion decisions, we are now going to be looking at the final stage, and those are the output decisions. So first, you'll notice quality control appears here again. At the output stage, quality control is a final inspection. You want to check to make sure all the breads are appealing. So this is the final check to ensure that the best product goes out to your customers. Next, inventory management. Now that the breads are made, how many do you want to keep in storage versus how long you will have them in storage? You don't want the breads to start getting dry. You want to ensure that they are being kept on a warmer, but not for too long. So you want to ensure that you keep the products fresh, and you want to ensure that you reduce waste. So inventory management is a critical aspect of your output decisions. And finally, we have distribution and logistics. How will the breads actually get to the people who want them? Are we going to have our own delivery service? So we have our own trucks and vans that go out to the supermarkets and the hotels to make these deliveries? Or are these customers going to have to come to us to pick up their deliveries? So we'll have to figure out the logistics of getting those freshly baked breads to those locations every morning without getting them cold or getting them stale. So one of the things that we don't want to do is look at these stages in isolation. They are deeply connected, and a decision in one area always affects the other areas. And let me give you an example. Imagine you're the owner of a business and you decide to save money on the input. So instead of buying high quality flour for the bakery, you buy a cheaper brand. That input decision directly affects the conversion stage. The dough might be harder to work with. It might not roll out as smoothly. It might not bake up as flaky. And then at the output stage, customers notice and they start to complain, and your sales start to drop. So you will end up with more waste. So one input choice rippled all the way through the entire process. So input affects conversion, conversion affects output, and output through customer feedback can affect future input decisions. So when you get your input decisions right, when you run an efficient conversion process and you manage your output smartly, the result is you end up with high quality, high productivity, and ultimately customer satisfaction. And it keeps the business profitable. So this wraps up our first objective on the major decisions in the production process. I hope this was simple and easy to follow. If it helped you understand the topic a little bit better, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. In our next video, we're going to be moving on to objective 2 in this section, which is all about techniques used in forecasting. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.